Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal. Patch 11.15 is coming out very soon, actually in just a handful of days, and with it, it brings an opportunity for you to level up and gear up a character super fast. Perfect opportunity for you to expand on your old collection, especially if you're trying to dive into something more meta for the season. You've done a little bit of gearing for your main, but if you wanted to play some of the strongest classes out there, now would be your best opportunity to do so. As somebody who enjoys Mythic Plus content and does videos on them regularly, I noticed that some classes definitely have it easier getting into groups than others. I mean, tell me if you heard this one before. Let's say you have a main character, really good score, but still for some reason struggle to get into like +10 weeklies for one reason or another. That's probably because you're not playing the class that everybody is looking for. So for today, I wanted to actually highlight the 3 classes that are now standing apart from the rest. Even though this is a very competitive season with quite a bit of variety of classes, and just about any spec and class can actually work, except for like Aug Evoker when it comes to DPS options. That's like the only spec that's actually down in the dumps right now, with everything else doing a lot better than previous seasons. But 3 specs do stand out apart from the rest when it comes to dungeon groups, and these are the classes that have seen the easiest time getting into all of the dungeon groups, either because they have the most amount of damage, bring the most amount of utility, or are just perfect for this season's dungeons. And I want to highlight those classes in today's video, in case you're looking to level fresh new alts or looking to play a little bit of the meta while it still stands, because it could potentially flip that meta in the next few weeks. As always though, if you want to see more regular content for the War Within expansion, be sure to follow the channel and subscribe. But otherwise, let's dive right in. Now, when going over some of the best options out there, I have one clear winner for ranged melee, but also a third pick. But when it comes to melee, Unholy Death Knight takes a clear stance ahead of all the other melee options when it comes to M+ content. Death Knights have been eating real good for an expansion that's not really Death Knight themed. Like you would expect they would be doing well in Shadowlands, death-oriented expansion, but in War Within, it was Frost in Season 1 and now it's Unholy in Season 2. Can they have 3 good seasons in a row, however? We'll find out by 11.2. But Unholy Death Knight, in particular for this season, has their signature AoE burst damage and tremendous amount of sustain shine, with so many dungeons from Dark Flame Cleft, Priory, Cinderbrew Meadery, so many opportunities for them to deal large amounts of AoE damage. With the more enemies you group up together, the more output you do, thanks to combos such as your Outbreak as well as Epidemic, which is just incredibly good. This class brings high value into Mythic Plus dungeons, and this is the reason why they're so much sought after. Like, players will bring in a Death Knight just because it's a Death Knight, because they have such short cooldowns with a 1.5 minute window for your Unholy Assault, 45 seconds for your transformation. The Sunland playstyle is super easy to play into once you figure out how to do the ramp up correctly. But like, your peak cooldowns, you spam in like a handful of buttons while doing all the damage in the world. So as long as you can do a setup, from there on you primarily spam with Vampiric Strikes, and whenever you can't spam that, you're pressing either Epidemic or Death Coil, and just about every player out there can do it, and it's super effective. They're also very durable, either through their own defensive abilities, but also through the protection of magic damage that they provide, through things like AMZ or Vestigial Shell AMS that protects your allies as well, to even a Lich Born from the Sun Land build that allows you to gain Leech for all of your allies so they can heal themselves whenever you pop a major defensive cooldown. It is something that they bring into a group to make your groups a little bit tankier, especially against magic damage. They're also really good at grouping enemies up together, as there's a huge number of really deadly ranged enemies in Mythic Plus dungeons, and while in the Liberation of Undermine raid, we couldn't really see a lot of grip potential for Death Knights to shine, A-Bomb Limb plus their own grips are available in many of these dungeons where there's plenty of casters that'll set a range pelting you down. Unholy Death Knight brings enemies together to then tear them apart with diseases and Vampiric Strikes. Plus, it's a class that does bring a battle res, so it brings plenty of utility when it comes to dungeon content, plenty of AoE disruptions outside of just grips. So it has a lot of ways to deal with a number of enemy mechanics, like AMS being able to protect you from anti-magic abilities, or even things like Death's Advance protecting you from slows and even knockback effects. So there's definitely quite a bit of value to bring for this current season. It feels like they're just made for it. We are seeing some buffs towards Frost as well, so maybe that spec will come swinging out of nowhere. But right now, as long as the pools are big, Unholy Death Knight's damage is only going to get bigger and bigger, which means that Unholy Death Knight becomes a really solid option that does help make many of these dungeons a lot easier. When it comes to range DPS, however, one of the best options out there right now is the Balance Druid for the range side of M+ dungeons. Balance had a really good run in Season 1 and continues the dominance in Season 2, which is not uncommon for boomkins. They're either really good for the season or they're not, and so far more within they've been fantastic. Technically, the class of Druid in general is really good, like Feral is actually getting quite a bit of play, but between Balance and Feral, Balance is definitely one of the better ranged options out there that helps make so many of these dungeons much easier. What really helps make boomkin shine, or I guess Druid in general, is with the fact that now that we don't have Augmentation Evoker in a lot of these different team compositions, you're looking to bring a DPS that not only deals the most amount of damage, but brings insane amount of utility to a dungeon group. And Druids have some of the best 5-man content utility in the game right now, especially in comparison to the competition, both in its offensive tools, but also defensive tools as well. Not only do they bring a raid buff of versatility with Mark of the Wild, which is a great defensive buff, offering significant amount of damage reduction, but also damage dealt, making them really solid in all compositions. But also you have a number of tools from the class challenge tree from Soothe to deal with certain enemies that can get enraged, remove corruption with poisons and curses, which there's plenty of in this set of dungeons, movement speed with Stampeding Roar that can be reduced down to a minute, so you are able to propel your party from A to B really quickly. In Cap Roar to be able to immediately destroy enemies, stunning them, or rather stopping some of their casts and destroying them for a moment, which can be really great. If you want a better way to stop enemies in the tracks immediately as a casters, Solar Beam is also really good for that hard 8-second silence on enemy targets, which can be really solid when grouping enemies together in the current compositions that are very Demon Hunter favored. Then we have things like your Typhoon for knockbacks, Ursos to keep enemies in place, and even combining the two together, Ursos into Typhoon has this like way to spread enemies and then grip them together, almost like a Death Knight Death Grip, but like a mass grip in a sense. They also have a little bit of group utility with Nature's Vigil, which has become a little bit more rare as more classes like Shamans, for example, lost AG, for instance. So overall, Balanced Druid is looking like a Swiss Army knife when it comes to dungeons. This is the most amount of utility you can bring, also having some of the best damage out there. That's another reason why this class is easily on this list. Boomies have incredibly good output thanks to their Starfall ability. Combined together with Moonfire, combined together with a real strong tier set, and the shorter cooldown of their Celestial Alignment means that the frequency of when they have their major cooldowns is a lot higher, where in previous expansions it was not uncommon for Druids to be effective every 3 minutes and then kind of meander outside of it. Druids can now flexibly adjust their major cooldowns anytime they need to. So if you're doing back-to-back really big pulls or saving something smaller for maybe a burst phase in a boss fight, they have that flexibility to just adjust their effectiveness and adjust on the fly as you continue and progress through the dungeon. There is of course a little bit of a discussion whether Druids have any survivability, because they do have to go into bear form quite a lot. A lot of the time in higher end keys, Barkskin just isn't cutting it. Though the meta right now has shifted to more very high Healy builds, with the Oracle Priest in particular being a very popular pick. They have nerfed Oracle quite a number of times now for the season, but it still should be very effective for a good bit of time, and it synergizes with Boomkin as the shields add extra additional health for the Druid. You can, and you still should, go into bear form for really high damage output situations just to help out your healer, because Druids do have the ability to dip into it bear form to reduce a significant amount of damage, but synergizing them together with Oracle does mean they get to spend less time in bear form, more time in Moonkin form, which means they deal more damage out there, while the priest focuses on keeping them alive a lot more often. So you kind of like synergize into your own specialty roles. You deal damage, they keep you alive, and it kind of just ends up working out for them this season. If maybe the healer meta changes a little, this could potentially affect Boomkins because they are kind of squishy, but as of right now, they're definitely very dominant. Now, the third DPS spot when it comes to some of the best options for Season 2 is actually a little bit more flexible. It really comes down to what other leftover utility would a group really need. If, let's say, you do have an Unholy Death Knight and a Boomkin as part of your composition. And there's plenty of classes out there that will continue to flow towards that third spot as long as the season goes on, especially as they continue to do more tuning. Ever since we got Aug Evoker out of the top spot, there's so much more flexibility as which class could claim that spot. Though right now, as of this moment, as I'll be making this video, currently it is occupied by Fire Mages, which may change as the patch goes on, because they're continuing to do additional tuning pretty regularly, nerfing even some of the stronger options and trying to buff up anything that isn't performing super well. And as we get better gear over these next few weeks, maybe somebody's going to outshine them. But fire mages right now deal impressive amounts of damage for dungeon situations, especially thanks to their tier set that allows them to unleash their strongest ability in the game, combustion, and use it a lot more aggressively. So they're no longer locked behind that 2-minute cooldown. Instead, they're able to use it every 30, 40, 45 seconds or so, somewhere around that ballpark, depending on how aggressive you are with pyroblasting and flame striking the targets. And it just allows them to have that power spike a lot more regularly. So think of a class, think of the strongest ability, and now you can use that ability in every single trash pack. And that's essentially what the fire mage is if you never played one before, which makes it ridiculously good within N+ content. Single target for this class is fantastic, and that's something that they're really good at, is being able to focus down priority enemies, which only a handful of classes can really do that effectively. AoE output is also phenomenal, which allows them to, whatever build you go into, whatever dungeon you go into, swap between better single target or AoE, depending what the group needs. So like if you have on a Holy Death Knight tearing through all the trash packs that will die very quickly, the fire mage could actually use that single target pressure to just focus down on an enemy that is on a higher priority, which makes him incredibly good and highly valued, especially in some of the higher Mythic Plus keystones. Besides that though, mage is also very independent, and they have a lot of tools to deal with damage taken, so your healer shouldn't have to worry about them too much as long as they're pressing their major defensive abilities. Major survivability is one of the best out there, making them self-sufficient. They have plenty of crowd control they can bring into the game too in order to disrupt any enemies around you, in order to stun them in place, stop them from casting for a moment, or just create a little bit of gaps where the healer might be able to sneak in a heal or two and prevent some of the damage going out. The group utility is also really overall good, with the mass barrier ability for instance, plus bloodlust, or time warp rather, and being able to reduce the cooldown of all of your abilities with shifting power does allow them to utilize their offensive, utility, and defensive abilities a lot more regularly, which makes them a fantastic option for players that are looking to not have to rely on any other class in order to perform within M+ content. For many classes out there, sometimes it's a bit of a trade-off. More single target damage, less AoE, or vice versa. Maybe a lot more damage, but a lot less squishier, or very tanky, but not really hard hitting. There's always some kind of a trade-off because classes do become, really specialized in their very specific niche. But fire mages right now don't really have that much of a drawback. They're just kind of good at everything. They're not really all that weak, they're fairly sturdy, they do a decent bit of single target and AoE on the fly with basically one build that works for everything. They have good amount of utility, they don't need to sacrifice too much for it. They don't really need to be healed that much because they have plenty of baseline tools to keep themselves afloat and alive. They're just in a really good spot that ends up complementing so many comps out there, and they're an excellent addition to just about any group that you make for M+ content. But with that being said, as always, I do want to thank all of you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys did enjoy this video. If you did enjoy it or found it informative, go ahead and give it a like. I would very much appreciate that. Join our Discord community to keep up with all the regular class changes and patch notes, which we've been getting a lot more recently, with 11.15 coming out so soon. Definitely join us in order to join in on the discussions. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and as always, I'll see all of you guys in the next one.